Joining us now to discuss is Rabbi Menken. He's the managing director of Coalition for Jewish Values. Rabbi, thanks so much for coming on. Since this story broke, Twitter says some of the locks were mistakes and most of the instances were correctly actioned. But Rabbi, what do you make of this situation when you saw it happening?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. When I first saw that there were reports of this, I couldn't believe it. It was coming from one organization in London, the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and I was surprised to recognize that this was actually a real story, that this had actually happened. It involves a very ham-handed approach and a lack of cultural sensitivity towards the Jewish community for Twitter to just go ahead and decide that anybody who is displaying a Star of David must hate Jews rather than perhaps being a Jew.
Yeah, it's very laissez-faire, just coming out, not really doing any research about it, just taking the image for what it is and not understanding exactly what that means to Jewish people. You know, at the same time, it goes across the board with Christianity as well, because you've got these attacks on religion. Case in point, you've seen churches burned across our nation, the one in D.C. that sticks out the most. You've seen, you know, statues toppled, really just attack on a lot of folks' faith, and specifically, quite frankly, when churches can't open up right now. With the pandemic, synagogues can't open up right. If you do, it's very limited. People don't know what to do. What do you make of this and what we're seeing in this unreal time in 2020 and what's happening with religion?
Well, it's really interesting to watch how certain people, their moral compass seems to be subject to the magnetic pull of politics. You have to have a certain set of values that transcend and supersede political action. I would like to know if they're going to be going after a Star of David. Where were they last week when the hashtag Jewish privilege was trending? It was ridiculous, it was obscene, it was anti-Semitic, and Twitter did nothing.
That's just, you know, it's just tough. It's tough to hear. And this is where we are today, and you don't know what do you do at this point? Do you get out in the streets and protest and riot? I don't see that from the Jewish folks out there. You know, it's just, you know, back to that point, QAnon, those accounts on Twitter, those were banned from the platform, and they took out some 7,000, I believe, on the accounts. And but you still have the Ayatollah up on Twitter, a known terrorist. How does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, you have Louis Farrakhan. I don't understand the rehabilitation of Al Sharpton. The last thing we knew about him was when he was helping instigate a pogrom in Crown Heights a couple decades ago. And he's never really apologized for that, and he's been totally rehabilitated. You would never find that with somebody on the right, for example. If they're going to go after QAnon for spreading fake news, I'd like to know about Antifa, which went right past spreading fake news to instigating actual violence. In Los Angeles during these recent riots, thanks to, BLM and Antifa working together, there were attacks on houses of worship, and there were attacks even on Jewish schools. It's outrageous.
The last question I had for you, kind of a different one, but I'm just curious to know, as you're a rabbi, where do you stand now with synagogues being open, how we're moving through these various phases of reopening? Are you allowing worshipers to come indoors? What's happening with that?
Well, I don't run a synagogue myself. That's A. But we're taking it very cautiously and one step at a time with face masks and social distancing. Actually, I prayed in someone's backyard just an hour and a half ago because we are gathering together. We're allowed to have a minyan, but not everybody. A minyan is a quorum of Jewish men to pray every morning, afternoon, and evening. But not everybody's comfortable going back in a synagogue. I have been attending various synagogues with social distancing. We're taking it carefully, one step at a time, and that's the way it has to be done. But obviously it's an outrage when these houses of worship are attacked while they're closed, regardless of which religion is involved.
That is Rabbi Menken joining us live on the show. Rabbi, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And you at home.